Before I get started in the sermon, I wanted to mention that I am on day 8 of my close contact protocol and testing negative and feel great. So here I am, as the county says, mask on, and here we are. But fortunately, as I've been told often in my life, I'm loud, so it should be good. The story today, we've heard it, right? And not just us, but everybody knows the story of the Good Samaritan, at least the kind of the basic points of it. The last couple of years, the lectionary has felt very different to me. At 26 years of ordination, that 3-year cycle has now been 8, almost 9 times through, and these readings land on us different in every cycle. And certainly, as you can imagine, over these last 3 years, they've sounded very different in many ways. There's one thing, I want to start with kind of the outside of the story and then work into it. At the end of the story, Jesus asks the lawyer, who was the neighbor to the man? The one who showed him mercy. The one who showed him mercy. Now, maybe it's just me, but right now in our society, world, and life, mercy feels like kind of a foreign word. I feel like in many ways we're very concerned about the story of the Good Samaritan from the standpoint of, did the man who was robbed deserve to be helped? Or was this justifiable bad luck because he's just a bad guy, right? A sense of a bit of a culture of punishment. Somebody has done something wrong or is not living the way I think they need to live, and therefore they need to be put in their place. Something needs to be done. We're in a world right now where there's a lot of that. There's a lot of concern about the neighbor not acting properly and needing to be put in their place. But the text at the very end, who was the neighbor? The one who showed mercy. So if you hear nothing else from this sermon, I hope that word mercy rolls around in your head as you move through this week. Going back to the beginning of the story, we have this discussion between Jesus and a lawyer of the law, of the Jewish law, who you might ask questions of technicalities or various things. And the lawyer gives the right answer to Jesus, but wanting to, and you might have heard me read it a little oddly, justify himself in order to justify himself. Now, as a Lutheran Christian, as soon as I hear the word justify, that immediately starts, we are justified by grace through faith. We're justified by grace through faith. But seeking to justify himself. Now, we might not think of ourselves as rolling through any given particular week in this great theological dialogue with God as we're picking up our coffee and moving to here and showing up at work and going to a meeting and stopping at the store on the way home. But I would suggest that as human beings, we spend a lot of energy during our waking hours seeking to justify our place in the universe. We spend a lot of emotional energy on that. Why do I have the right to be here? Why should they not be here? I went to the right schools. I'm in the right job. I live in the right neighborhood. There's all kinds of things. And then we lay awake at night wondering if we've justified ourselves enough or if somehow we fall short. Seeking to justify himself, the text says. As Lutheran Christians, in spite of how well we sleep or not, we know that's not the way it works. We don't justify ourselves. We think of that word justification, and suddenly we think of kind of dusty theological volumes, but think of the last time that you worked on some kind of a document on your computer. Was it left justified? Was it right justified? Was it center justified? Maybe it was both, right? How was it lined up? How was it organized? When we talk about justification, we say, how are our lives lined up with God? How are they made right with God? Now, the lawyer is seeking to justify himself, as if the letters on the page could somehow form a union and start organizing themselves. But we know that's not the way it works. The justification comes from above, through grace, where in today's text we might tack on also the word mercy, right? So as we move through this familiar story, we hear about a man who is on the road from Jerusalem to Jericho. I think in these stories we often think about what these people are doing. It's not on vacation. Maybe he's trying to figure out, am I 8 days out from my close contact? Trying to remember. What's due at work this next week? What's on the shopping list? All the kinds of things that we as human beings wrestle with, walking along, perhaps a bit distracted, and is attacked, right? He's in the ditch, they leave him for dead, they run off. There are two people who come by, and scholars debate a bit about the significance of their identities, but the story is very insistent in including their identities, which seems somewhat important to the text. A priest from the temple and a Levite who has similar kinds of responsibilities. Both come up and see a fellow Jew in the ditch and say, that looks fun, but I'm going to go over here and walk around. Good luck with your life there, buddy. Skip past. Sense of human blood on your hands is problematic professionally from being prepared to lead worship. There might have been some small sense of being in obedience to God and not stopping, perhaps, which Jesus is clearly pointing out. I think you're misunderstanding a little bit what your obedience to God is. But oftentimes in our lives, we like to schedule things. So, 10:45 on Sunday morning works. I can be here for that portion of my day. Hopefully the preacher doesn't go too long and totally throw off the lunch plans, but, so far so good. Or perhaps you might say, this weekend we don't have a lot going on. Perhaps I will serve God by volunteering at this place between 8 and 4. It's now in my calendar. But that's not how this story goes, does it? We don't have the sense that the Good Samaritan that morning got up, was sitting at the breakfast table, looking at the calendar for the day and say, I think I'm going to walk on the Jerusalem-Jericho road because I have some time this afternoon to assist people who might have gotten attacked. That's not at all how the story would go. The Samaritan is going along. He sees the man in need. As we heard at the end of the text, shows mercy, right? Shows mercy. This is somebody who would have been kind of an outsider in a sort of way. It was not always appropriate. Samaritans were considered to be outside a bit, so this is a bold crossing of boundaries to assist this man who has been attacked. This incident for the Samaritan is not necessarily safe. I don't know necessarily in a sheep and sharks sort of way, but you kind of get the idea. Socially not safe. It's not free by any means. The man takes, and you'll notice in the text there's this added deliberateness. He doesn't say placed him on the donkey and walked to the inn. It doesn't say that. It says placed him on his own animal. There's this added emphasis to the idea that he is giving up his place for this man to take it. He leaves 2 denarii with the innkeeper. A denarius is basically 1 day's worth of wages. And you notice what he says to the innkeeper. He does not say, hey, buddy, I've done my part. The baton is now yours. He doesn't say that at all. He says, do whatever you need for him, and I will pay you whatever it is when I return. Think of how much this Samaritan not only has helped, but has deviated from whatever his plans may have been for that day, at risk, at cost, and ambiguous risk and cost going forward. The one who showed mercy. I think if we think of this word mercy, an understanding that we are called to serve God, not when it's convenient or scheduled, but often when it is an interruption, something that might cost us, something that we maybe didn't wake up in the morning going, I hope God really gives me this opportunity today. None of those kinds of things. But often, we find ourselves in the midst of it. And I think that's a challenge to open our hearts, to be engaged, to know that in our baptismal callings as Christians, we are not always called to some tightly scheduled and choreographed, curated Christian life, but rather something that is an interruption frequently, something that causes us to do something we wouldn't choose to do on our own, things that are not necessarily without cost to us. There is a lot going on in this text, I think, as we think of the individuals moving through it. The one who showed mercy. Jesus responds to that answer by telling the lawyer, go and do likewise. Go and do likewise is what Jesus tells the lawyer. As we read this text today, Jesus tells us, go and do likewise.